Handmake channel, welcome. Right, today, I'll tell you what's going on. I'm starting this video for the 4th time in a row. What I'm doing is I'm trying to design and create a catch in a way and make it in a way that's not been done before, a way I haven't been taught, just trying to invent a new way of doing it. And sort of getting so far and then giving up on it or changing an idea or it doesn't work out how I thought, and I don't know, it's been a right old faff. So I'm going back to my first attempt and just doing it in a way that I didn't want to do on my first attempt, which will most likely be the way that it works. Anyway, so I'm going to try again. Really, if I was sensible, I'd just do the whole thing, get it finished, and then make a video, make another one, but I'm not that clever. Anyway, so let's get into it. I'll just say thank you to new patrons. We got Eliza, Mirza, Monia, Malia, and I'm going to guess the pronunciation of this one, Jorge San Martin. Thanks very much, guys. Apologies if I mispronounce your names. I would rather get it correct, but you know the deal now on this channel. I get everybody's names wrong. But yeah, thank you very much. I do appreciate all the patrons, all the Diamond YouTube members as well. The contributions from people really genuinely make this channel possible to continue, so very grateful. I enjoy making the videos, but yeah, it's very time consuming and quite expensive as well, all the bits I'm using. Anyway, so right, let's get into it. I'll show you what I've done so far and explain about what I'm trying to achieve. So this was my first attempt. I'm going back to doing something like this. Basically what I was doing, I wanted to make it like this, but I didn't like the idea of putting a slot down the middle and then soldering in a little piece like that. I didn't want 2 solder joins there. So I've been carving this out of a solid bit of metal, which is totally possible. I was doing it quite well. I sort of stopped at this moment, but just a little bit more tidying up. It would all be neat and perfectly usable. But when I was doing it and making the video, I just felt like it was a bit kind of awkward for teaching people how to make it, how to follow what I was doing, because obviously leaving that bit solid and then cutting out all this shape, I just felt like it was a bit awkward for beginner jewelers. So after that, I was trying to think of a new way to do it. So this is a strip of metal that I just folded up, just folded it over and then rolled it over again, so you can see it's sort of doing that. But then looking at it in my hand, I thought, oh, I've got to solder the bits together. So I didn't like this way, really, at the first moment, having to solder, put a little bar there, because when you cut through there, a bit's going to come off. If you cut that side, that length will come off. If you cut through there, those 2 bits in the middle will come off, so they all have to be joined together. Wasn't really liking it. And then I thought, well, I've got the slats this side, so that piece will come out that way, but that's the wrong way, because I need the slot to get on there. So then I was, okay, no problem, I can cut that out, but then just doing the divider lines, I thought it's not really what I wanted. I wanted just that piece to come out in the middle nice and neat. I'm sort of back to the awkwardness of this one again, of sort of trying to cut straight lines and stuff, so I didn't really solve my original problem. But anyway, that's just me being stupid, not thinking ahead before I dived into it. And yeah, another way was another version of that. It didn't work out. So yeah, back to square one. So what I'm thinking of doing is going back to this one. These are all really big and heavy, by the way. I did that. I've chose these dimensions on purpose so I can show you clearly what I'm doing. And if you're making something for the first time as well, big is always easier than doing a really small version. So try a big one. This is like 3 something mil square. Yeah, 3.8 call it. So yeah, it's a big chunk of metal. But yeah, it's big, so easier to do on purpose. So I'm going back to this way. I'm just going to cut straight down though. I will just have to get over myself and end up soldering that little bit in. It's just a square bit of wire. Just wedge it in there and then solder it in. It's not that bad. I just didn't like the idea of having a solder joint there. But anyway, that's the easier way to do it rather than trying to carve it out of solid. So with your bit of metal, I think the first thing to do is just round it off. Round off the top. So just one side to the other. Well, you saw it like that. So, quite easy to do, wouldn't bother drawing any lines or anything, but you could. Oops. Take a corner off one side, take a corner off the other side, and then I'm just going to do it by eye, just looking at it from sideways on, and then just blend them into each other. Filing that rounded. Hasn't got the exact curvature of a circle or anything, just whatever you think looks good. So I did a bit with a file, did the majority of it with a file, and then just neatening it up with a coarse whizzer. I just want to crack on with this and get it done today, because I'm still a bit annoyed. I've been starting to stop in this job, or this video, for a long time. So look, I haven't done this before on the channel. It's what some people like doing, and I don't do it, but I do actually like it. Maybe I'll start doing it more often. But let's see that, I've just put black ink over it. And then what I'm doing next is putting 2 lines down the side, so dividing it by 3. So it hasn't got to be exactly, but it's nice to get them kind of similar. These are just set up from yesterday, so they're still kind of about correct. Yeah, so dividing it into 3 sections, so putting 2 lines down the middle. And with that black ink, you can very easily just put a very fine line on there that you can see clearly. How far down should we go? I'll give you a measurement. Let me tell you exactly what I've got, just so you know. Don't expect you to copy this exactly, but just so you know what you're looking at on the screen. Call it 3.8 that way. Yeah, 3.8, so it's quite square section. And the slot, we're about to cut a slot down, cut out that middle section. Just looking at what I did on this one, seemed about correct. Just over 7mm down. So anyway, it's a little bit of what looks right for what bit of metal you're holding. But yeah, you'll get down quite far. So we want to carefully now cut out this center section. And I'm thinking now, I just said a lot of people like using this black ink. I'm thinking, and I don't usually do it, but I'm thinking that might easily rub off just from handling it. I might lose those lines, I might have to keep reapplying them. But once the ink's rubbed off, you're just sort of back to what I would normally do, is just score it into the metal. And what I usually say is, if you use a like paper disc, they're quite good because it's sort of a not unidirectional kind of lines on there. So it doesn't matter what direction you're scoring, if you're going over the surface left behind by spinning paper disc, you can always see it. Otherwise, just get a fine buff stick, say I want the lines going that way, I buff that way, and then that way, when I use my dividers, I can see the line clearly. I think that's a bit more, the lines you're putting on the metal like that, like I normally do, is a bit more hard wearing, thinking about it now, with these, seeing these lines on the ink. But anyway, let's see how it lasts, might be alright. Just looks faded already to me now, that's why I'm thinking of that. So anyway, I've got enough distance with the width of it to sort of do two saw cuts side by side. You want to be careful not to go outside of your line, so you want to cut just inside them. Cut inside them with your saw blade, and then you can neaten them up with needle files and paper discs or whatever afterwards. Just carefully look what you're doing and just cut straight down. Keep your saw blade parallel to the sides and watch your angles. Don't be looking there and then accidentally sort of cutting this way as you're going down, because you're going to ruin it. You want nice parallel sides on there. Ooh, and don't do that. I don't know what to tell you, just go slowly and work carefully. Like doing gentle saw piercing. Doing gentle saw piercing is one of those jobs where you just lose your focus for just a moment, and then you can just zip. It's the wrong direction, just one little zip. And you kind of, ruined a piece, but it's such a shame because it was just so easy to avoid. And you ruin things, you end up having to file one side thinner. It depends what you're working on exactly. Like if you're cutting out the shoulders, split shoulders on a ring shank going up to the collets, if you sort of trying to sharpen it up, a gentle little zip is all it needs. If you go the wrong direction, it just is a horrible looking little thing. You can't really correct nicely. So yeah, you got to do saw piercing quite carefully. Different jewellers hate different things. Like I'm not fond of soldering. Other people love soldering. I've worked with people who hate saw piercing, but I quite like it. I like just the simplicity of just the motion of your hand and the saw blade. You're doing all the work. You got to work carefully. It's like active meditation. You got focus, and it's almost a bit zen to do a good job. That's why I mentioned on my videos before, put your phone away. Don't even have your phone in the same room as you, because it's a distraction. Especially if you've got notifications, like turn all that off, not even on the screen. If you can even see it, takes your mind off the job, and you're literally stopping yourself reaching a higher level of skill. If you're always distracted, you're always sort of losing your focus. It is a big difference, I've noticed. When I started my apprenticeship, jewellers I worked for, they'd be able to focus really attentively on their work for like hours at a time. I was the generation of the first sort of teenagers to have mobile phones. We always getting text and stuff and sort of always thinking, just distracting you a little bit. So I think my generation is the first of having lower levels of attention at the workbench. People older than me, even 5 years older than me, they may have practiced having more focus and more attention over longer times. Just show you my technique if you care. Sort of start on the top and then working my way down. So I'm concentrating on one side and the other, like my left cut and my right cut, and what I do is I angle my saw blade, sort of draw a line down where I want my saw blade to go, keeping it nice and straight, and then I sort of straighten it up and sort of saw down to it, but not too much because I want to do the same the other side. See that, go straight down and then straighten up the saw blade. And you do kind of work your way down. Just always got to be careful not to let your saw blade wander left or right. I turned it round and sort of going back down the other way now. It feels like I'm nearly there. I've still got a very thin little bit of metal in the middle, so I'm cutting down. I suppose you could just cut directly down the middle with a really thick saw blade. I think more likely to do a messy job like that, but that's just my perspective of how I work. Other people might be really good at doing that kind of thing. I was just about to say, if you keep the saw blade moving, you should be able to turn it without it gripping. That felt like it just gripped. I don't know whether I should have put a bit of extra beeswax on it before I started trying to turn it. So let's get this one lubed up. Let's try that again. Keep it moving, then start to turn. Doing stuff like this, but test your fingertips out. So you've got to hold on tight as it gets really hot. You can't really let it go. I reckon if I go down the other side of that slither of metal down the middle, it should come out. There you go. A little matching piece. Anyway, scrap. So now I've got this. Let's tidy up the edges. Okay, so let's go in depth with this tutorial. You can see the lines, my dividers left behind. I've cut inside them. I now want to take the edges back, so I've got like my stone cut-off wheel, just fits in there. I will open them up carefully with that, and then it would be nice if I've got a needle file that just fits in there. One of my thinner ones might do. If not, I'll probably just use this anyway. I'll just go to a paper disc, a new one obviously, I can't use that. Yeah, just neaten up with a paper disc. So yeah, do a majority of the metal removal with a little stone cut-off wheel and then tidy it up with a paper disc. But these paper discs, if you've got coarse ones, they're pretty good for getting metal, removing metal. So just a fresh coarse one would do a good job of that. But I like the stiff ones because they're just dead flat. They don't flex at all. If you try and flex them, they just snap. So you can only ever cut really sharp, straight surfaces with them. These bend a little bit, so you can accidentally sort of put things a bit of a wrong angle or round things off accidentally. Anyway, so do what you got to do, get them nice and parallel and flat. Doing this is similar to opening up a daylight hole on a side of like a gate style collet. It's a gate, not gay. Okay, what I'm doing, I've got it reasonably good. I mean, I'm going on and on about the best techniques and getting it really neat and stuff. I don't think it's actually that important because it's going to be filled up with a straight bit of metal that we'll just mill out and fill up the space with. Anyway, the bottom, I've just literally got a small ball burr just to help flatten that. So what I do is I get it to a certain stage. If you remove all the marks you put around the sides, get it nice and clean. I just went over it with a paper whizzer. Just went around it again, and then that sort of clears up exactly your distances either side. Mine's still quite wide. I mean, my gap is still narrow, so the sides are wide. So I'm hoping I can just open it up a bit more, and then enough to get this needle file in. It'd be nice to be able to get that in, and then that'll be really helpful then to really get it flat, and I can hack into it. And also, because it's got teeth on that side, I can go right down to the bottom, straighten out the bottom really easily as well. yeah, it was really helpful being able to open it up enough and then be able to get this file in there, especially going down to that bottom bit as well, because obviously that's straight and flat. I can just cut into the bottom and that just straightens out the bottom bit. All right, so doing that shape, haven't moved my tweezers, so they're still, sorry, my dividers, so they're still that line. I might just use that again on this side, don't have to. And yeah, 2 lines at the sides, and also you go over the top carefully. You just want to keep the same distance going around the top. There's no reason at all why we couldn't have done this first, but I sort of went through the job in my mind and thought it's just going to be easier to work on one side than the other. So rather than trying to go straight across this thick bit of metal, drilling through it and stuff, and getting your saw blade in the thick bit of metal is a bit hard, a bit more awkward to manoeuvre it around. So with that in mind, I decided to just cut straight down first. You might disagree with that, but whatever suits you. We all work a bit differently, so I'm never too strict on people doing things the way I do it. I'm just sort of showing you what works for me and trying to explain why I think it is most suitable. But at the same time, do what you want, mate. So I'll give you a measurement from the top down to that horizontal, horizontal line, looking at that way. Bottom one is about that, 4.3. Anyway, I'm just telling you the measurements, take it or leave it, but it's just whatever looks right at the end of the day. And what it needs to do is, say that's a pin, you need enough distance for that pin to go in the side and then sort of click up a little bit and be secure in that position. So just got to go that way and that way. So another option is to just simply design it with your marker pen. That's where my pin needs to sit. That's where it's going to go in. There you go. Maybe that's the easiest way. And then with that bit that comes outside, obviously it goes straight across there. I think it's worth having a line going across there. Probably start with that. It's just easier to hold it like that and cut a saw blade straight across, make sure that's straight. It'd be a shame if you went wonky on that would kind of ruin it. So yeah, there you go. That's what I'm cutting out. Holding it in pliers. I like holding things in pliers lately because it just holds things dead still, unless they slip obviously, but in your fingers, even if you hold them really tight, there's a little bit of flex and stops you cutting really sharp, nice straight lines, I think. But at the same time, I'm well aware a lot of jewellers will only ever hold on to things with their fingers and make things very well, so again, don't listen to me, just do for yourself what works. Anyway, so be careful, it'll be a shame to balls us up at this stage. So I like the idea of starting with that line that goes straight across. So I'll zoom in a little bit on what I'm doing here. That line that goes straight across there, I'm starting with that just so I know I've got that straight and we'll build the rest around that. Got my 2 saw cuts in there, 1, 2 side by side, and then you totally could just get your saw blade in and then turn it and go up there. What I'm thinking now is because that top's rounded, it just makes me think I may as well just drill into that. I may as well just drill through it and then use a phrase to sort of clean it out a little bit. I just think it's going to be so much easier than manoeuvring the saw blade around, and perhaps that's why I got to this stage with this. It was all tricky little angles and stuff, trying to get my saw blade in there, trying to avoid hitting that, and then thread it through and then tidy it all up. It was all a bit, it's totally possible, I was totally doing it, but it just felt awkward and gave me doubt about teaching people to do it that way. So that's probably why I ended up putting that down in the first place, and I've sort of got to the same stage and I'm feeling now it is a bit awkward manoeuvring saw blades around in thick bits of metal. So I'm gonna drill into that. What I'm gonna do is get a small ball burr. Definitely don't stamp on that because you'll just close them up. Like push a spike in there just to get a drill guide. Bit of dip in where you want your drill to go. Do one side then the other. Nice sharp drill. I should have videoed that. I just sharpened it. It took me like 3 seconds and it works really well. a little bit of oil. I'm using Yamalube gear oil for motorcycle gearboxes. It's basically a really heavyweight oil. It's just really sticky, so on a spinning drill, stays on there, so it keeps doing its job of lubricating rather than just flinging off or sticking to the piece. So there you go, little drill hole going through there, both sides. What should I do now? Maybe I can put my saw blade in that and then just cut straight down 1, 2, down to where I've cut across. Might be a good idea. It's a bit jigging about, doing it that way, doing it that way. Just get them out slowly, slowly. Just got to be careful cutting through and going to that back wall. You don't want to put a nick in the back there. That side just fell out. I was trying to get this one out. There we go. Cool, getting somewhere now. So I show you what I call a raw stage of my work. That's just what I've cut out. So now it needs loads of effort, tidying it up, taking it back to my divider line, get the horizontals nice and matching, and then all the thicknesses matching. Yeah, it used to be really annoying when I was at work in London. Like, I get to this stage and then my boss might just be passing quite often, and you want to look at what I was doing. And so of course I pass it to him, and he'd get like his loop out and look at it and be like, oh yeah, you need to open it up a little bit more, you need to like tidy it out. I was like, yeah, I know, I haven't finished yet. Like, yeah, can you just, there's not enough space for a pin yet, you need to open up a bit more. I was like, yeah, no, I haven't finished. It's happening all the time, it's really annoying. Okay, so I got this now. When I'm making these things, I do kind of imagine people making things along with me, like we're all at the same stage, but I bet that's never the case. I bet people just flip through the videos and think, all right, I'll have a go at that. But anyway, just as an example, I picked that up as like you use your pin perhaps is a good idea, have a pin ready that you're going to be using on your brooch. This has become my pin now, so I've started just naturally making it with that in mind. So I had to open it up a bit more to get the slot there, but it's a bit clicky. I think it's because that's not quite straight yet. As you see, there's a bit of a hook there. So basically, you could open these right up. Maybe I should Google a few pictures of these that are already made by machines and stuff that are proven to work. You could open that right up. Basically, that could be actually quite thin around there. I'm leaving mine, I'm sort of cutting out the minimum, but maybe you shouldn't care that much, just open it right up. Did a bit more tinkering, it's just straightened out a little bit. So now I'm thinking, because we've been putting files in there, you've got burrs sticking out on the inside, so just freshen it up a little bit. Very gentle little touch with a paper disc. So I'm thinking we need to block that bit up, but before we do that, I may as well get the centerpiece in, and then without that there, it's easy to slot it in and we'll just score around it and get the shape we need. So I'm going to do that next. So next, mill out a bit of metal that fits in there tight, not really tight, but just sort of fills up the gap, but can still move, can still pivot inside, you know what I mean. I've got a fine drill, really thin one. I'm just concentrating on this side first. Just like when you're drilling through like a full eternity ring, have a look from that side to make sure it's going straight. Have a look straight down. And then slowly, slowly. So just eliminating all the guesswork basically, just by checking all the time, not just put the drill through and see where it comes out. So I've got drill that side and drill hole that side. I was fiddling about a little bit last night off camera. I've just going through the job and thinking ahead. Got this bit of metal that slots in there, perhaps a bit overly tight, but that's preferable. I can always skim it down if I need to. I think it's important to get the bottom of that nice and flat, so it's good if you can get a file in there. If you can't, you're gonna have to get a small ball burr in there and maybe slot your saw blade in and just chop it out. and then get that piece of metal that slots in there nicely. And then I don't know if you can see that. That's what I mean. I put a drill hole in there, just drilled straight across. I wanted to drill that first, and then with that in position, I can just put the drill in again, and then hold it. Basically, I wanted to do it after, so I can push it in really tight, and then put the drill in, so it's definitely in a good position. And then also, I don't know if it shows, I've angled that down because if that tilts forward, I want to be able to create enough space for a pin to go in. So that might need further adjusting, but just trying to move forward with it. So next, I'm pushing that in, and then simply put my drill in again. Where's my drill gone? A little bit of oil just on the end. I'm literally pushing that in tight as I drill it. When it comes to actually drilling it, same as my advice doing full eternity rings. When you've got to drill through a ring, it's really important your drill goes in at the same angle all the way around a ring. Same, put it in position and I look down on it, making sure it's not sort of left and right, and then look at it from the side and making sure it's not up and down. You just get it going in straight. Drill's a bit blunt. If I'm just doing one drill hole, one or two, I do battle on with slightly underperforming drills, but if I'm doing loads, like I was talking earlier about the full eternity ring, I'm very quick to decide to stop and sharpen it. You literally will complete a job faster, even with all the extra time of stopping and sharpening. There you go, so that's in there. So when I pull that out, a little drill hole. Okay, next I'm thinking it's an extra bit of quality if it doesn't do that, if it only goes one way, not the other. Anyway, so what I've got to do now is tilt that back as far as it goes, and then in that position I will score around it to make sure it can't go back any further. So I'm just going to score around that, go around the inside and everything, and leave, when we cut it out, we're going to leave a bit on top. That'll be the little thumb piece, the little catch to be able to move it back and forth. Doubt that shows up clearly on camera, but I've got lines there going up and down, so I'm just going to cut out that shape. I don't worry about going inside. It's a little bit different because obviously when it's closed, that needs to be, when it's in directly up position, it needs to be closed. So that one hooks down, this one hooks up, really. So there's just like a little hole in the middle where the pin will sit when it's closed up. So next, I'm not going to film this, I'm just going to cut it out. I've scored around the inside, so I'm just going to cut straight up, straight down the side, leaving that little bit on top. Just do a square, you can shape it up after. So there you go, chopped it out, really ruffle it, it's all good. You can do all the tidying up afterwards. So let's get that in there. Holes lined up, put that in. There you go, doesn't rock back, perfect. Only goes forward a little bit, so we actually got to take more off that corner. I may just file up the side a little bit, get it more flush to like that one. Not quite there, but nearly there, that's where I get it to. When I've really got it all shaped up perfect, like all the hole and everything cut and it's sort of working correctly, then I'll really tidy up the sides and get it like just so, finishing touches. So just like that sort of is good enough, I think, to move on with. So right, next I'm gonna mark out the inside just so I know where that sits when it's closed. Open up the middle, and then like I said before, we're going to leave that bottom half comes up. Like on the outer piece, that top goes down. On the inside bit, the bottom goes up, and then it sits closed. Okay, shaped it up a little bit further, but what I'm thinking now is before I cut out the middle, I want to get it working how it should. So it doesn't rock back that way, good, but it needs to come back much more this way. And I'll do that simply by removing metal off the bottom, just so there's space for it to rock forward, basically. So I will just do this. Needle files. Just take a bit of weight off there. Maybe with a file that actually does something a bit better. That should come forward. There you go. Comes back forward a lot more. That's probably enough. So what I did was drill a hole right through the middle where I scored it out, and then I'm just going to zing it out a little bit. I can barely see the lines I've scored on there, but it's kind of obvious what I need to do because it's just going down parallel to the sides. Right, done the minimum. Let's test it out. Same with like mounting for stones and stuff. Just keep checking what you're doing to make sure you're progressing the correct way. So I need to chop down a lot more, but left and right is okay. Anyway, bit by bit, make your progress. Okay, next step. Got this far now. I'm thinking we need to solder that little bit in there to join that side to that side, just across there. I'm thinking we should probably cut out this bit of metal where that's going to sit first, and then we can use that to make sure we solder it right in so everything's all nice and tight. And then it might need some further tweaking to make sure that can still move forward, and then there's enough space for a pin to go in. I don't know, you sort of tune it, just get the basic foundations of it made, and then you tune it up to make it work. So yeah, next I'll put my pin back in, make sure it's in the correct position. Then I'm going to score a line there. I would score a line, then cut above it. You don't want it closed and there'd be a little gap there if possible. Yeah, so there, and then cut out this distance again, because that's my pin dimensions I'm working with. Yeah, that distance up. So we're cutting out a little chunk there. It's going to look like that, cut across. So I did. You can see I've cut a space out. It doesn't need to be a big chunk to go across there. It's just to sort of join those ends up. So I'm looking, just to clarify, I've cut that groove in the center section, and then that now shows me how thick I should put a little bar in. Also wanted to say, I picked this up last night, and I know this happens, but sometimes you just got a bit of energy, a bit of time, you want to do something. Because I've been a bit delayed getting this finished, I wanted to move on with it a little bit. So one of the things I did last night was paper disc that angled down a little bit, and then just looking at it now, I did a bad job. You see that? It's gone all tilted down the side. So you have to, this job, even like I've got like over 20 years experience, I still have to work really carefully. If I'm not like, got full energy, full attention, I'm in like full focus and everything, like really paying attention to what I'm doing, I make a mistake. I don't work to my normal skill level. So I'm looking at it now, it's like I shouldn't have touched it last night. Just for like a little bit of progress, I've just basically just ruined it. Not ruined it, but I made it worse than it could have finished up. So I can either file it down now, I might leave it for now. It needs a lot of tuning up anyway. I might even end up opening up that hole in the middle. So I just milled out this little bit of metal. It's just enough to go in that. Just pushes in there. So perfect. That's all we're really doing is sort of joining those two end bits rather than two little hooks. You've got to join them together. Okay, so I've got my piece. It just slots in there, but be careful. You want it tight. But you don't want it so tight you end up opening up the top. It's really minimal tightness. So obviously just for soldering, it's good to have a nice tight join. You don't want to see two little lines there after it's soldered up. Yeah, just take your time, get it just right. File it nice and straight is the key to it, and then just do little bits at a time. I cut that length of metal. It was useful that it was long to maneuver it in position, but then when it was in position I cut it short, and then that's more convenient for soldering. I put a bit more heat on the solid end first just to warm that up. There we go. Okay, Okay, I've soldered my piece in. I put mine on purpose slightly up from the edge because, like I mentioned before, I'd done a bad job like opening it up, and this side is up a little bit. So with my piece slightly up, I'm opening up that space, which I think you kind of need quite a bit anyway, more than your pin, because the pin goes up at that angle. So sort of killing two birds with one stone. I'm giving it a bit more space, and I can flatten it, allowing me to get rid of this tapered edge. So it's slightly like that. I can flatten it now up a little bit. I've done a quick bit of work, sharpen that up. It wasn't too bad. So I need to open up that slot so that can sit in that position. So that needs to sit under it, and then that top bit is going to sit on top of it. So I need to tidy up that corner so that can sit in. Basically match the depth of that top to bottom, that piece we put in, to the gap. Just where the solder is a little bit rounded. Done. Very little work, but you've got to be really careful with it. So just going to open it up, open up the top half. How should I do that? Just trying to put it in position, and the gap is correct. So I was wondering why it's not going in, and I still need to do a bit more work. There's still solder rounded on that inside edge. So yeah, making these things tight and work nicely is fiddly. This is when you've got the bits made, getting them together and working nicely, that's probably the most difficult part of doing this. So a lot of checking with your loop and seeing what's going on. So I've got to carefully chop this out a little bit. Yeah, like see inside that, a bit flat. I had to sharpen that corner right up. I had to do it really carefully. I had to do it quite good to get my piece to fit in there. So there's my bit now. Obviously it needs a load of work, look, but it does what it did. Slot it in there. See that? I'm going to go in now, so that fits. So just put my drill in there again, see if it works. Doesn't go back this way. No, it doesn't go forward. So now I need to find out why. It's likely because that bottom bit is flat, so it's just locked up against there. So you need to put a little bit of an angle on it. I might have to round it off. Anyway, I'll fiddle with it. Like I said, there's an element of me. I've got to play with it, find out what I did and what worked, and then tell you what happened and how I changed it to make it work. So bear with me. We're in the realms of experimenting. So anyway, it sits in position and the holes line up, so good so far. Got to fiddle with it now. Before I start shaping it up, like the internal side of it, I thought I'd better get the outside correct, or at least very nearly correct. So I'm doing that first. Basically just holding it in position and then carefully filing and papering it down. This little piece, it will be a nice touch, I think, if you made a tiny little ball. Oh, sorry. If you made a tiny little ball and then soldered it on. Hello. Yeah, tiny little ball and then soldered directly on top. Might be a nice little thing, be more comfortable. It'd probably look like more like a nice handmade thing rather than that. But having just a flat piece sticking up, it's in danger of making it look a bit machine made. Although I'll think about it as I proceed. So I'm just looking at it, just went around it, sharpening it all up a little bit inside, and I was just looking at it, thinking I'd be able to, looking at that bit through my 10 times loop on it, just to wiggle it a little bit, just so I could see that is what's stopping it. And there's a bit of a gap underneath it, and when I pull it, it doesn't move. There's nothing to do with that gap. It's actually the top hook that's actually just locked in there, really square. So I need to round off a little bit. And then hopefully it still looks like that on the outside, but has space for it to move. So I'm gonna, I can't do this one hand because it's in there quite tight. I'll pull that out, and then that top bit, I'm gonna let's say, is out, I'm going to sort of round off that corner a little bit, and that might help give it space to move this way. So that's my inner piece, yeah, that thin bit in the middle. So locked in there like that, I want it to go this way. So it needs to rock that way. So I think if I just take off this corner a little bit to round that off, that might help it. And I don't want to, hopefully it does, because I don't want to take that away, because I like it looking all closed and tight. But I've got to do what I've got to do to make it work. But I'm hoping I can just muck about with the inside of that and get it to actually shift. Okay, I put my saw blade in, I just chopped off the inner corner, and yeah, it starts to move. It moves a bit more, but not enough to fully open. So I've got to basically take that right out. I'm just going to cut it. I'm just going to scoop it right up to the edge. Let me know in the comment section if you know how to make one of these, because I clearly don't. Check this out. Oh, comes right forward now. So it doesn't go one way. Perfect. Goes this way. But still problem. A pin can't go in there. So unfortunately, looks like I've got to take from that bottom one, take a bit of an angle off that way as well. I say unfortunately because I like how that closes up to that. So I might have to get over myself. That's going to be rounded just there. Still going to be closed, but just that corner is going to be rounded off. And then hopefully I can do it. I'll do it carefully and then find the minimum amount where, oh, sorry about this, where that can go up in and then in there and then close while it's inside. I kept working on it until that can go inside. So that just goes in with it. Put that in. Oh, looks like it's not going to go in. Maybe it's just got to come out more. Okay, right. If I can get it to swing out a bit more, we should be good to go. And I do that simply by taking this corner up a bit more. Good to show you all this trouble I'm having, because you might encounter similar troubles. See, that's hitting the bar. Should have checked that before I should have looked closely like this before I started working on it. Anyway, so it's hitting the back of that bar. So what I'm thinking of doing, that bar is actually just square. I can actually take a bit of weight off it, because it's like that. I could take a bit of weight off it that way, still be strong, and that'll allow that to go forward a little bit more. Other option is just to thin out of that centerpiece, thin it out a little bit there, so I can take meat out of that, and then I can take meat out of that, and it should open up enough to get that pin to drop in. I just carefully take that corner off. So yeah, filed that out. It opened up a little bit more, but not enough difference. So going to stage 2, I'm going to take that out. What I did is I put it in position, looked closely, and put a mark on it. That's where that wire is touching, or that bar is touching. I'm just going to phrase it out a little bit. The next time I make one of these, I'll have all this in mind, so I can make things slightly differently. So I should be able to make it work properly easier, rather than making it wrong. This is what happened to me. Yeah, I made it wrong, and now I'm having to do loads of adjustments. So just make it correct next time. Alright, so this is how it had to be, unfortunately. Not as closed up as I would have liked. It's like that. Opens right up. I don't know if you can see, where's my 10 times loop? Can you see, oh, it clicks in the bottom there. And then now, there you go, goes in there, look now. Close it up, one up. Okay, so this is working good now. I wanted to show you that as it is, just so you know what it looks like. I was looking at it and I thought it's a bit ugly. I cut out a bit too much of that top, and this is over filed as well. Took too much off that corner. I don't like how that's flat. And that's still rough, obviously. I could neaten it out better, but didn't like how that's flat. So while you weren't looking, and also while I wasn't recording, I made another one. It's a little bit better looking. And on the top, I just soldered that bit of wire on. I wasn't going to do that, but I put it on. I thought, if I just leave it a little bit too long, going over the sides, it's a nice little effect for when it's in here. So, yeah, just kind of knowing what to do, and then you can see what I cut out, that middle bit of that. I just put a little nick there, and then with a file, just opened it up at the right angle. So it's just working a bit nicer. Come on, so put that in. It doesn't go back. Oh, sorry. Doesn't go back. Only goes forward. Opens up just enough for my pin to go in. And obviously, I could have made it easier for myself by working with a thinner pin. So I did a lot of fiddling about to get this to fit, but I wanted to battle on with it because it's more like a real professional jeweler experience. You might have a customer's pin. The job you might be doing is just to make a new catch, like similar to what they had, or your own design, but it has to be handmade. So you've got to work with what they got. You can't just thin off their pin just because it suits you better. So there you go. So that works. So next I'm just going to put a bit of wire in and rivet that. Or maybe I'll just go over it and buff it a bit nicer. So end of the day now. Unfortunately not finished this again. Another working day, full day on it. Still not finished. But I took the extra time to do that middle bit again. So I wanted to just talk about, I practice what I preach. I do talk about always having an attitude to do a better job. Like I spent ages on that first one, that centerpiece. A lot of tweaking, a lot of figuring out the best shape, about making it, getting the pin in first of all, and then making it work properly, getting it to open up enough. I learned a lot, and then just looking at it finished, working fine. Looking at it finished, I just thought it was a bit ugly, and then I'd taken out a bit too much at a wrong angle on the top, on the inside scoop, and then I filed a bit too much off that corner. So worked fine, but looked a bit more gappy than it should have done. So I practiced what I preached, took a step back, spent a load of extra time making a better one, a stronger one, or the nick on that inside inner curve is in the correct position. It's a bit stronger, not over filed, so when it's closed up it's more like a solid unit, not a big gap around it, all the little corners and stuff. So I just made a quality one. So I took a step back, had the attitude to do a better job. So yeah, if you can, it's not always possible because you're limited on time and money, metal, quite often when you're working as a professional jeweler. So anyway, if it's possible, I think it's worth doing a better job. And just with that attitude as well, you're raising your skill and you're practicing putting your experience into play. Like you may have learned a lot trying something for the first time, and then you can do it again immediately after and do a better version, which is what happened to me today. So yeah, just wanted to talk about that. Okay, next day, the home run. Let's get this thing finished. So I would say if I was actually making this, actually doing a job rather than doing this like demonstration video, I'd be thinking now about buffing it really smooth, getting it all nice and polished. Even when you're hand making something on an expensive piece, even just like the little bit sticking up that you can see, that would have to be polished. You got to sort of think of everything. I'd string it all out in there to make a really nice piece. You spent I've spent way too much time with it. I spent like 4 days making it. But if you just like spent a whole day making it, why not spend a little bit more time really finishing it to a high level rather than leaving it all scratchy and saw bladey inside? Just a little bit extra work and you can really raise the quality. So those finishing touches, they take a lot of extra time, but they do improve the quality so much. So yeah, I would fine paper it all. I'd be looking to string it out in all the difficult to reach bits. And like I say, even this inner bit needs a buff. So I'm going to freshen it up a little bit before I put it together. I've just been pulling down some wire. The guide, because I was using this drill to put through the hole all the time, so I measured the drill just under 0.7, so that was my guide. I just pulled down some wire quickly, just over 7, I thought perfect. It's going to wedge in there nicely. You don't want it really tight to the point where you can't do it, or there's a danger of pushing it out of shape or breaking the top off or something if you're having to use so much strength to move it. But at the same time, you don't want it flapping about either. You want it to sort of hold its position. So yeah, you want to aim for things to be tight, but not like difficult to use. Twist it, wiggle in there. Is that too tight? No, it works. That works nicely. That just a nice bit of resistance to it. Cool, so I like that. So yeah, a little bit bigger than my hole, than the drill diameter. But where I've put that drill through that hole so many times, there's a chance the hole is actually a little bit bigger than that. Would have caused a bit of wear and tear inside it. So anyway, that bit of metal's in there. Let's do a bit of riveting. Just get the ends nice and flat. Do a bit of riveting. I would recommend getting the metal nice and flat on top, the bit you're going to hammer. If you're hammering just like that snipped off finish, that sort of chamfered edge, it's difficult to make it look nice afterwards. Okay, see that? It's just about, it's hardly anything. It's like a millimetre, like maybe a bit less than a mil is probably correct. But anyway, you just want a little bit sticking up both sides, and then we simply, with a pin hammer, tap them down. So a pin hammer, I'll use both sides of these, but start it off with the wider flat side first. And you want it ideally to sort of, that top of that end of that metal to sort of mushroom over equally all around it, not just go in one side. So I sort of rotate it around, or my hammer as well, sort of working around it a little bit. It's quite gentle work, especially on a little soft bit of silver. It's probably a good idea if you've got hard alloy metal. This is a piece that gets a bit of wear and tear because of the movement of the trigger. It'd be good to make really all of this in hard alloy metal. Would probably be a good idea. Okay, that side's done. Better than this side, and concentrate on this one a bit more. You got to look at them closely, because like this one, it's starting to spread more one side than the other, even though I feel like I'm doing it evenly all the way around. So stop and have a close look every now and again. You can rescue it, and then also I'd recommend test it's working. If it's getting too tight, you need to do something to change that. Also, moving parts, pieces with moving parts. I always, with usually a cocktail stick if I could find one, I will get my oil. I'll just dip a little bit of oil, maybe a screwdriver or something, just dip it in all the moving parts. Don't flood it anywhere, but just so there's oil in there. And that helps things work nicely and continue to work nicely as well, not all getting all scratchy and worn out. But I've got a brooch in mind for this kind of catch, so there's not a lot of movement on them. They do have to take quite a bit of weight sometimes. Ideally brooches are lightweight, but not always. People don't always appreciate that. Alright, I'm liking this. Okay, this is the end of the video. I don't bother going into polishing. I'm just teaching how to make stuff. If we want to polish that, I would just say use, like I said before, clean it all up, get both parts polished before you put it together. But then for a general polish over, there should be very little work to do. But you could use little bristle brushes, soft ones, or just your normal mops. I think if you polished it nicely before they went together, there'd be very little work to do at this stage. So yeah, I left things to point out. I see on the top that bit of wire I put on. I did that flat piece. I didn't file it all the way down. There's a bit on toplet just to make sure it cleared the tops of that, but perhaps it could have come down a little bit more. But yeah, it's just something I didn't want it scratching across the top. Other than that little piece, I could file the outside of that, and then there's a bit of a lump on the bottom half of there, so it needs a little bit of fine tuning perhaps. Maybe do all that and then give it a final polish. But yeah, there it is. Does it work how I want it to? Doesn't go back at all. Good. Only goes this way, and it feels pretty good. If I can get it to focus. Nice bit of resistance. I suppose I better show you with the pin going in. Okay, closed. Pin doesn't go in. Open. Pin will fold down like that, and then you push it like that, and it'll have a bit of spring on it, so it'll want to go back up. Clicks in. Pin's in there, locked in there, nice and safe. Open. Push it open. Pin comes out. Wallop.